David Gura and Tom Keene with Robert D. Kaplan. Everyone knows my affinity for his realist international relations. The body of work is absolutely jaw-dropping. Years ago, my book of the summer was The Return of Marco Polo's World. My book of the year last year, a wonderful 280 pages, The Loom of Time Between Empire and Anarchy. He has been ferociously writing. Robert T. Kaplan and the must-read Wasteland, A World in Permanent Crisis. David Gura with Robert D. Kaplan.
And few bring in sort of reference to history and art and writing with original reportages as well as he. Robert Kaplan, great to speak with you this morning. And I confess I was thumbing through the galley of your latest book, Wasteland, A World in Permanent Crisis, while I was covering the G20 Leaders Summit in Brazil just a few months ago. And it was such a strange moment at which we were looking to see what President Biden might say or do. He really stepped back and didn't say much of anything during the course of that gathering. And we saw kind of the reconfiguration in real time of alliances on the ground there in Brazil. The role of America being questioned and other countries coming together in new ways as a result. Help us understand the moment that we're in as we hear so much about what's going to happen here to the rules-based order, to the way things have been for so much time here as we see a President Trump returning to the White House and espousing the protectionist policies we first saw just a few years ago.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I think we're at the end of the post-war order. Post-war, I mean post-World War II, but also a few decades after the end of the Cold War. We've had the same international order since 1945, essentially. The United States has been an empire, in reality since then. And you see it not only with Trump's lack of interest, not just making demands on NATO partners, but his lack of interest in the alliance in general. And the alliance, of course, rose out of the ashes of World War II. We also see it with his attempt to close down the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, because that, too, has been a pillar of the post-war order, even though most people until a few weeks ago didn't really know much about it, because it was through USAID that American foreign aid to countries throughout the developing world was channeled. So you had hard power through NATO and our Pacific alliances, and you had soft power through USAID. Trump is going after all of that. It's not that he's an isolationist. That's absolutely wrong. Trump engages with the world. What Trump is doing is he's adding another layer to Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny used to be about America conquering the West from east to west, from the East Coast to the West Coast in the 19th century. Now he wants to expand Manifest Destiny north to south, from Greenland to the Panama Canal, from the Arctic to the tropics. He sees a world of regional, rather than an American-led post-war order, he sees a world of regional geography-based alliances with China, the United States, etc.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but picking up on something you said a moment ago, and that is him kicking that leg of the stool, the soft power leg out from the stool. What are the consequences of that? I mean, we've heard from Samantha Power, the most recent head of USAID, making the case for preserving that organization and keeping its good work going. Atul Gawande, who worked there recently as well. I don't know how much that's resonating, but what are the consequences of losing that focus on soft power?
I think they're immense, really, because soft power you need when things are not going well, when you're not on top of the heat, when you have, soft power is influence in countries, having connections in countries, knowing people, because you're working there, you're doing things in case of a hostage crisis or some sort of crisis. You always have a phone number to call people. It's about building relationships censorships, and all of that would go. Just a word on AID. You can make the case that AID has not been managed as well in recent years. However, the way to deal with it is the way that tough Republican presidents of the past dealt with it, like Ronald Reagan and others, by fixing it, by putting in real hard-nosed business person types to run it.
Robert Kaplan with this, folks, in celebration of his new effort, 200-some pages, Wasteland, Gura read it in Brazil. I haven't, to be honest, read it, but top of the pile right now. The Loom of Time, from Morocco out to Persia, was spectacular. My book of the year last year. Robert Kaplan, E.J. Dionne alluded to this weekend in the Post, but Richard Nixon in 1962 was an author, and then he enjoyed losing as governor of California to Pat Brown. He was at his bottom. What comes after Trump? Have you framed out in your mind that this, let's assume he's not going for an FDR 3 terms, but after President Trump, what next for our politics?
We've had first of all, one of the problems with America in terms of American power and America's trajectory is that that the center is gone, rather than a center-right and a center-left governing the country, where presidential elections were not existential. You now have a progressive left and a populist right. Neither seems to talk to the other. I think after Trump, what you're likely to get is another populist right regime, or go back to the progressive left. The real story in American politics is the destruction of the center, the destruction of the political center, which is partly the result of the end of the print and typewriter age and the beginning of the digital video era, where news is not in the middle, nuanced. It's all about passion and anxiety and short bursts of simplicity through social media.
And David, I want to point out from Berkeley, Paul Pearson and Eric Schickler. Folks, for those of you in the markets where you want one read here, it's Kaplan, really accessible, Wasteland or The Loom of Time, and a little more dense. Paul Pearson and Eric Schickler, their book Partisan Nation is shocking in describing what Dr. Kaplan just mentioned.
I hear you saying that the center is gone, and I can't help but think of the poem from which your book takes its name, of course, The Wasteland by Eliot, and how that's always been one we read in complement with or in conversation with The Second Coming by Yeats. Of course, center cannot hold, and what I'm very curious about is, and I've thought about it over the course of the weekend, last week as well, is the role that Elon Musk and others from the tech industry are playing now in the governance of this country and sort of setting the policy direction of the United States. It's something that you touch upon in the book, but I wonder sort of how what we've seen over the course of these last 4 weeks has advanced your thinking on that relationship between Silicon Valley, what we identify as genius or technical facility, with managing this country, with setting its direction, and how perilous that might be.
Yes. The late Harvard political scientist Samuel Huntington said that America was always great, not because of its people, but because of its institutions. The separation of powers, not just in Washington, but between county, federal, and state out in the countryside. It was institutions that made America great, and the sanctity of them. What we're seeing with Elon Musk is an erosion of institutions. More and more executive orders. This didn't start with Trump. It started with Biden and even before that. But more and more executive orders, the increasing power of the executive, and the executive in more and more collusion with oligarchs, super rich people.
But then over the week, so they were all at the Super Bowl. Robert Kaplan, with what you just said, I think everybody of all political persuasions on this morning commute across the nation are simply saying, where's the legislature? Where's the judiciary? Do you assume that there will be checks and balances into March or April?
I'm not sure. I just know you can devise the most brilliant constitution in the world, which the founders did through the Federalist Papers. And they said it, that we can devise the greatest constitution, but it all ultimately comes down to human character, to the stability of people, to their ethics. If you have people who are irrational, unethical, or in some way do not have real standing, moral standing, the best constitution is not going to help you.
I have seen you recently described as, variously here, a pessimist, a tragic realist, and a Hobbesian. I wonder what gives you any optimism here about the continuation of the American experience in light of the reading and work that you did on this latest volume.
What gives me optimism is that because America is a boisterous democracy, it's gone through these periods before. Stylistically and in other ways, this is not that much different from the Jacksonian upheaval of the early 19th century, when Andrew Jackson, a rough-hewn, unsophisticated, only partially ethical frontiersman, came out and wiped out the regime of the very effete aristocratic people from Massachusetts and Virginia, and the country went on. It went on to a new burst of development and dynamism, etc. So it's a bad bet to give up on the United States completely.
Robert D. Kaplan, I have to talk here about your loom of time, and I've just got a minute to do it. If you were to write an epilogue of the Middle East, of Eurasia, from Morocco over to Persia, what would you write of today?
What I would write up today in the loom of time, I did not cover the Israel-Palestine issue, and that was good because I probably would have gotten it wrong and the book would have been dated. But I would obviously have to write about that, what has happened in Gaza. And I would just say that the big question out there, now that Israel has dramatically weakened Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis in North Yemen, the biggest question out there is the future of the Iranian regime. Because if the Iranian regime were to implode in some way or fashion, it would be a world historical event that would change the Middle East.
I got 8 more questions. How many do you have?
Many more as well. We could do the
Michael
hour.
Barr, do you have more questions for Robert Kaplan?
Oh, he's too smart for me. I'm sorry.
He's killing it. Robert Kaplan, thank you so much. Too short a visit. We thought we'd do that, folks, to frame out where we are X number of days into Trump's second administration. Robert Kaplan, in celebration of Wasteland. Gura is the only one on the planet who's actually read it, which is very cool.
It is very readable, and I commend it to everybody. You as well, Tom. Yeah.